Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Rockets. Today I sit down with one of the founders of Torch Technologies, a 100% employee-owned systems engineering, applied science, modeling and simulations, and information technology business. First off, thank you for taking the time to sit down and talking with me. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, I'm Bill Roark. I am the co-founder of Torch Technologies and was the CEO for about 15 or 16 years here. I stepped down a few years ago and am now an advisor. I'm also the CEO of Starfish Holdings, which is the holding company that owns Torch and also owns Freedom Real Estate. And the employee ownership is held at the Starfish level.
So looking at your website, I mean, Torch has had a huge, I mean, it's been around 19 years, and it was founded in October 2nd of 2002. But I kind of want to first start by talking a little bit about your history and prior to when Torch was founded and the ideas for Torch. I know that you're originally from Kentucky. What originally brought you to Huntsville at the time, and how long have you lived here, and when did you first move here?
Well, I moved here in 1984. Found out about Huntsville because a couple of my advisors in graduate school actually took jobs here, and so I reached out to them. I interviewed all over the eastern United States, but as I looked in the different cities where I had job offers, Huntsville just sort of stood out as a place where we'd like to live, and so we came here 1984 and went to work for Dynetics. I worked there for a little while and then went over to Nichols, and which is where my career really took off.
Yeah, and looking at Nichols Research, you said you started there in 1986, and you were able to work there for quite a long time, even work your way up to being a vice president role. How do you think the time at Nichols helped prepare you for what you do now and kind of understanding the business more than just what your role would be within the business?
Well, at Nichols, said they didn't have a big concern about your age. They really focused on what you're capable to do, so was able to be promoted through the system there very rapidly. I was sent around to several locations throughout the years, and in that capacity had the opportunity to see how business works, run the profit loss of several organizations, and actually get an inside glimpse of the actual business model of how the company ran. And Nichols was a really darling company. It was sort of the key place where people wanted to work when we were here before it was sold. And so not only did I learn about the business, I learned about it from one of the best businesses. So you got a real introduction to how this business works. And Torch is very similar to how Nichols operated and how Dynetics operated years ago.
So I know that your co-founder, Don Holder, you worked together at Nichols Research before it got sold. At the time when you were working with Don, did it ever did you ever think about the idea of if I was to start a business, Don I would start it with, or did that kind of conversation come up later?
No, Don and I really ran parallel organizations at Nichols, and like I said, Nichols was sort of the place to be, so I never really thought much about starting a business somewhere else. Probably if Nichols had survived, I would be here at Nichols today. The building we're sitting in is former Nichols headquarters. Probably be here today picking up the gold watch. I'd be about ready to retire. So I probably would not have started a business had they not been sold.
So you were working at Nichols Research, and you start. They get sold, and I was reading that it took a little while once you kind of had the idea of starting something, and you were tossing around this idea. It took a while for you to kind of get Don to kind of commit. How long did those conversations last between you and Don before you were able to convince him to, jump in and try something?
It was several months. I think I first reached out to Don in July, and we had breakfast at Rolo's over here on Airport Road several times, and Don was retiring. He was working at Cass at the time, and he had decided to retire, and he had already informed Cass that he was retiring. And so I reached out to him, and when we looked at my background and Don's background, where he worked out here on the Arsenal, we'd had some overlap. In fact, early in my career, I actually did a few projects working for Don. So I'd known him from there, from those projects, and so I knew the business areas where he knew out there were consistent with the business areas I knew, and I also knew there was some turmoil. So from that perspective, I knew if I could talk him into it, that between the two of us, we could get started in that organization. And I think I finally got him to realize that, he wouldn't have to hang around long to have a big impact and to have a big upside to it. And, he came on board. Don was a extraordinary leader and businessman. He and I thought very differently
Hmm.
and complemented each other very well, much like at Nichols Research, Roy Nichols and Chris Horgan
Hmm.
were two very different peoples, but had great success working together. Don and I, although we thought about things very differently, we had a common goal. We really cared about the people who worked for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that bonded us together quite significantly. And we really cared about the customers that we worked for. And, I cared a lot about the numbers of the business because that's what I'd been drilled into me at Nichols. And Don cared a lot about making sure that the programs ran correctly and that the customer was happy. Not that I didn't care about the customer and Don didn't care about the finances, but that just seemed to be where we ended up in the business of watching and being responsible for. And together, we probably made one good leader. I think Don could have been successful on his own. I think I probably could have been successful on my own, but together we were an incredible pair.
Yeah. So I was reading that when y'all, so like in October 2002, when Torch kind of began operating and you kind of finally convinced him. I think you convinced him in September and October is when you first kind of were founded. I read that you were operating in just a few offices, a conference room, and even the night before you didn't even have any tables or desks. You had to go to Staples and put some together. At the time, how many employees did you have, and how did you go about finding them?
Yeah.
Were you convincing them for people that you worked with in other companies, and was it a tough convince? I mean, I feel like going from a business that like if they were working at Dynetics or working at Adtran or working at any of these other companies that do very similar things, to go to a company that doesn't have a track record. And I feel like that might have been a tough thing. How did you go about that, and what did it look like?
Well, you did some good research. I don't know that it was ever written down. I don't remember that about me putting the desk together the night before we opened the office. And we bought a lot of used furniture too.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the desk that I sit in right now, we bought used shortly after we started the business, and we started in a small office off of Drake over there, and moved down the street later when we started to grow. But one of our first big mistakes is we moved in that small office, and we thought that would be big enough for us for a long time, and just 3 or 4 months in, we had to break a lease, which was very expensive because we outgrew that office so quick. In fact, Don and I moved out of our office and put multiple employees in them, and Don actually went home to work, and I ended up sharing an office with the accounting person, our CFO. At the time, we were all crammed in there, and then of course we had a lot of people working out on Arsenal. And I probably haven't answered your question yet. The early days were just, convincing people to come to work for us. We had a different story, I think, than anyone had heard before. We didn't like the fact that we had been sold, and when you get sold like that, I was running an operating segment of Nichols, and I had the ability to make commitments to people and follow through on them. I could tell you if you go win this program or you win this business, I will give you a bonus or a stock option or whatever. The day that sale took place, my ability to follow through on the commitments that I had already made was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's a bit of a devastating feeling. And he and I both had been in that position and both, saw that. And so, what happened over the next few months was very different for both of us. Don left and went somewhere else. I was in D.C. at the time, and I sort of hung around and worked through the transition. But some few months into that, it became clear they did not have a long-term plan for me, and eventually I got escorted to the door up there as I tried to force the issue of I wanted something to do.
Yeah.
And there didn't seem to be, I was young and had been very successful, and it put me a little bit at odds in an organization with a lot of older folks. and they just didn't see that I could lead an organization, I guess, of the size and stature that was consistent with what I was being paid at the
Mm-hmm.
time. So through whatever decisions, I ended up, with a nice severance check
Yeah.
and escorted to the door, and was a strange feeling. I
Yeah.
never really thought I would see
Because
that.
you never start working at a business thinking that one day it would get sold,
No,
especially something that you've kind of been able to work your way up and
yeah.
been successful.
And so, as we started this company, he and I both did not want to repeat that. So we looked for a business model that would allow us to create what I would refer to as an evergreen company, that we would be in business forever, that we would not sell, that we would build in by design up front an exit strategy for the founders. And that exit strategy was that we would sell our stock to an ESOP, and that ESOP is owned by the employees. It's the retirement plan of the employees, and that ESOP would buy the stocks, and ultimately in the end game, the employees would own the company. When Don retired about 6 or 7 years in, the ESOP bought his stock, and over the past few years, the ESOP's been buying my stock, bought 100% of the stock that I held outside the ESOP back in 2011 when we did the transaction. And the stock that I hold inside the ESOP, it has been buying over the last few years. And as I retire, the company will be able to buy that stock. That's often what forces a sale, is the founders are looking for a way to, get their money out of their investment. So they look for a buyer. The ESOP is a little bit different approach from that. It's a lot more complicated. The sellers probably don't get the premium dollar, but they do get the satisfaction of creating a place where they're not seeing their people escorted to the street, and it's a long-term legacy.
Yeah.
Don and I will always be able to, rest assured or relax or smile knowing that we didn't create that situation for our employees, and that's something that makes me happy. It creates a good situation for the employees as they're owners in the company. They're motivated to make the company succeed, and they participate in the growth and value of the company. So it creates a nice retirement plan for them as well.
Definitely. So I feel like kind of looking through the timeline of Torch, and so we see the beginning when you first started and not having very much and quickly growing out of it. I feel like the industry you're in, contracts are what makes or breaks a startup. I mean, being able to land a contract is what not only helps pay for your employees, but helps. I mean, it's what you need to be successful. Take me back to March. I think it was in March 2003 when you landed your first prime contract. Was that like an exciting moment? Did it come easy? And did you think? Was it crazy to think that you've only been around 5 months at that time and you're already landing a prime contract?
Well, we didn't land a prime contract in 2003, but we did get several subcontracts that were substantial. And our first prime contract was probably 2005 or 6, and it was small. And then our first large prime contracts came in 2008. And it was an interesting evolution there, because we realized that if we were going to be different, we could grow up and be a 50 or 100 person company, which was our original goal. But as we started to grow, our goals started to change, and we could have been a 50 or 100 person company and stayed as a subcontractor and stayed there forever, and probably been reasonably happy as a small company. But our leadership, started to realize that we could grow and we wanted to grow, and that created opportunity for other people, and growth created opportunity for them. And as we continued to push, we realized in order to grow beyond the 50 or 100 person, that we needed to switch from being a subcontractor to a prime contractor. Then in 2006 and 7, we started to look for prime contracts, and then I guess it was 2007 we made the bids. And keep in mind, we're 3.5, 4 years old at this point when we start to make these bids. And these bids, back in that day, they don't do it so much this way now, but back in that day, each bid was exclusive. If you were
Hmm.
not on a winning team, you were just out of luck unless
Oh
you
wow.
had something that was really advantageous to the government. If you weren't on a winning team, so uh, basically at that time we bid a series of contracts that if we didn't win, we would have been out of business.
Hmm.
We had been subcontractors and we decided to bid as prime, and
That's a huge jump at that
that was a
point.
huge jump. We had just read one of these books. I think it's Good to Great. I don't remember the title, but they talked about major milestones, and we sat around the table. The leadership team said and did, and we decided, we had to take this chance. And full well knowing that if we didn't win one of these contracts, at least one, we'd probably be working somewhere else. There were 8 contracts we bid, and we won 4 of them.
Oh wow.
$440 million. A little company that was doing about $25 million a year wins contracts of $440 million.
Which people probably started to put Torch on the map at that point.
It did, and it totally changed the complexion of the company. We went from being a 90-95% subcontractor company to a 90-95% prime company, which is where we are today.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of our work is as a prime contractor and not as a subcontractor.
Oh wow. That's so like, and like I felt like those big things. I mean, at the time, it just kind of felt like it was the next step. Like it didn't seem like it was a tough decision. I mean, it probably was a tough decision, but you saw the growth and you saw where it was going, and you just kind of you had to go in.
Yeah.
I guess
All in.
Was it a tough thing thinking that like this is an employee-owned company, and if you go all in, you're not only going all in for yourself, you're going all in for your employees.
Well, the upside was so huge that we felt like the risk was worth it. I mean,
Yeah.
You go from a $20-25 million a year company to winning $400 million worth of contracts to be executed over 5 years. The first concern was, can we fill the ceiling? And yes, we did. We filled the ceiling and filled it early.
Yeah.
And they had to be recompeted early. So, we went from a $25 million a year company to well over $100 million over the next 3 or 4 years.
And like, do you think at that point when you took that step and you started winning, and people, I guess, in the government contract, in that world, do you think people started realizing like, hey, I'm interested in working at Torch now because I've seen what they were able to do so quickly?
Yeah, and one of the there's been several elements that contribute to folks looking to come to work for us, and one is the business success, but the one that also shows up pretty consistently in our application is what we do in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Since 2004, I think we put it in place. We've had a charitable arm that's run by the employees, not by the company, but by the employees, called Torch Helps.
Yeah.
And I originally asked a couple of employees to set up a thing to screen charities for the company because I didn't know how to figure out which one to give money to. We wanted to give back to the community, and what they came up with was totally different, and that was a employee run organization where the employees made payroll deductions, and they decided where the grants went and which charities were supported, and they had a screening criteria. Well, that was well beyond what I had asked for, but it's been immensely successful. And so even after we rolled out that program, I still had the problem. I needed to go back and figure out how we screen charities for the company. And we have now put together a committee inside. So now we have, support from the community directly from the company and directly from Torch Helps, which sometimes work together, but usually work independent of each other, and sometimes support the same charities and sometimes go in totally different directions. Torch Helps has been, we see a lot of applications show up, and they say, we're impressed with what you're doing in the community. We want to work at a company like that.
Yeah.
So that's been a big help for recruiting as well. But yeah, the technical success and the leadership role that Torch plays has helped immensely too.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of wanted to. When I was looking through your the achievements and the timeline of what Torch has been able to achieve in its 19 years. I mean, if I was to go through every little big event, we'd be here all night. And you've mentioned some of them already, but I kind of wanted to highlight a few that happened from 2004 to 2011 that I think are, I mean, looking on the onset, I think are huge. In 2007, in August 2007, you made the Inc. 5000 list for the first time, ranked 18 overall, a fastest growing private defense contractor in the Southeast, and number 8 in the defense contracts category. And also in 2007, you were also named the Small Business of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce in the technology category. In November 2008, you were named Large Business of the Year by Alabama Technology Association. And then in March 2011, you passed $1 billion in awarded prime contracts / task ordering ceiling. I think that is just a testament, I think, just to what you and Don were able to put together and kind of envision what the company would be, and knowing that the employees are such a big part of that. And like I said, taking that jump and taking that first thing where you're like, if I don't make this, there is no more Torch. Looking at those achievements in those first 7 years, is it crazy to think just how fast you were able to grow and the success, like being able to get to those milestones that companies don't get to in the first 10 years?
Yeah, it is crazy to think that we never envisioned that when we started. I still have the original business plan, the original charts, and when we started, we'd been extremely happy to be 100 people, and and looking back on it, it's interesting how those goals changed as we grew as people. But Don and I were really fortunate in that. Our previous careers had prepared us well to understand the business, but it also prepared us to know the people we needed to recruit. And, we got some spectacular recruits very early, that made huge impacts to the company. And I won't say their names, otherwise other companies will go be trying to recruit them away. But, certainly in our internal stuff, we call them out by names. But, we had folks that had knowledge and relationships in the business that put us in an incredible position to be able to perform and to be able to write the proposals to win and those types of things, and just the previous history that had prepared us well for this as well. But still, when I think about it, in fact, over the last few days, I've been scratching out some notes for myself, and I hope to at some point try to write a book to describe all this. But I was scratching out some notes for memory, and it was really key about the people.
Yeah.
Somehow we got together the right people, and they formed a culture.
Yeah.
And a culture of success, and a culture of caring, and a culture of caring about each other and working together, that I wish I could claim credit for creating. It's really hard to imagine how that came about, but it just happened. And I think a lot of it had to do with the motivation we provided people. We had rewards for working together, and not just business awards, and for doing things that were good for the company to encourage people to do that. But I think the people we got just had that demeanor. They just had that in their, that's the way they thought. And we were very fortunate to get that combination together, and we've been very fortunate to be able to screen people to protect that. We've had cases where there's folks that are immensely qualified for positions, but as we understand through the interview process how they think, they may or may not fit that culture, and so we're very protective of that culture. It's easy to train someone an engineering skill. It's not easy to train them how to think and care about others.
Yeah.
That's an innate skill that we look for. We want people that care about others, care about the community, and are willing to work together and share success, not claim success for themselves. And that's been key to our culture, and I think our culture just drives. And there's a number of videos out on YouTube where we talk about our culture, and I usually get choked up when I'm talking about that. So, but it's been right at the core of treat people good and let them treat everyone else around you good, and
It definitely helps creating that. I mean, it is, like you said, you said you love to be able to take credit for it, but the employees have really made it.
yeah, the employees made it.
They have
and,
made Torch what it is.
And occasionally a few of them will come in and close the door and say, "Hey, we're heading in the wrong direction here. We think you ought to rethink this."
Yeah.
And that's happened. I don't know, dozens of times over
Yeah.
the 20 years. I stop and listen.
Yeah.
Because
their perspective is probably just as important as anyone's.
it's probably more important because, I sit in the corner office and I don't engage as much with the employees as they do. So they're much more sensitive to the feeling among the full population of
Mm-hmm.
employees, and as we make decisions about policies and issues, how they'll be received, and as we make decisions about staffing and those types of things, they often have insights that I can't get sitting down there, or John can't get down there. John Watson, now the current CEO, and I've been fortunate also to. It's hard to replace yourself. I've been fortunate to have folks step up and do a good job after I.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a tough thing.
Down.
That's a tough thing, especially being the founder, and it's the company is your baby. I mean, you've been able to see it grow over these last 20 years almost. It's definitely hard to relinquish roles and responsibilities.
Well, and that is the toughest thing is to let him do his job.
Because you're like, can I help in any way possible?
I try really hard to only offer help when he asks. Occasionally I stumble, but I try really hard not to.
So I guess like the experience that you've been able to see. I mean, lots changed within the industry itself now in 2021. But I mean, your experience from starting at Nichols to now doing what you're doing now, I mean, like that's a valuable information. And you said writing a book one day. I mean, I feel like it would just be incredible. So looking at the growth, kind of jumping back into what the journey throughout this, I feel there's a lot of, I mean, Torch is skyrocketing. I mean, you're getting a lot more. The company is growing. You're having 200, 300 employees. Like it's starting to increase very quickly. What was the moment in 2013 when you first opened your office that wasn't in Huntsville? And I think it was in Colorado Springs, if I'm not mistaken. Was it kind of a cool? I feel like it would be a cool feeling for me if I was to start a business and see someone operating it in another state, or did it not feel that way for you?
Well, I spent much of my career at Nichols in field offices. I started here in Huntsville, but they sent me to Utah and then to Albuquerque, and then I came back here, and then I went to D.C. and actually went to a couple or three different locations in the D.C. area to work on integrating acquisitions into the company. So I spent a lot of my time outside of the headquarters, and so I guess for me it didn't seem like that big a deal, but there was a good excitement to know we had planted the flag somewhere else and that we'd figured out how to do that. And it took us a little while to get a base formed there and become successful, but once we got that recipe going, then we've been able to start a number of other locations. Now, I will tell you, John's a lot better at that than I am. He also ran a field office for Nichols, but his process there when he came on board to help us. That was what I asked him to do.
Yeah.
And he's been very successful in leading the charge of expanding the company beyond just a local presence. In the early days, we really focused on here in Huntsville because there's so much happening here that it didn't make sense to spend $1,000 to get on a plane and fly somewhere to try to do something else when you could spend all that time here and
you could just drive 5 minutes to get on the Arsenal.
And from here we're about 7 or 8 minutes from the customer's office, so that really
it was direct to the source. I mean, like you said, I mean, after you kind of got that first location in 2013, you've since been able to open locations in Florida, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Texas, Virginia, Kwajalein, and Egypt. Which is, I mean, it is.
I probably couldn't have listed all those off.
I think it's crazy to imagine, and then now you're even operating in so many states, and you have over 1,000 employees. that are all benefiting from this employee ownership. Is that I think that's what's almost breathtaking to me, is just imagining that there's so many different people who are almost, I mean, you've been able to make their life different based on what you've been able to accomplish in the 20 years.
Yeah, that was the plan that Don had and I had from the beginning. We wanted employees who stayed here and worked their career here to be able to retire comfortably. The and ultimately we wanted them to be able to retire comfortably early.
Yeah.
Not work till they're 70 or 75, or they only work till they're 70 or 75 if they want to continue to work. And I have to admit, that's been one of the most rewarding things for me, is to watch employees go home at 59, 60.
Yeah.
Just pick, okay, it's, we had someone this last go round, and our ESOP statements went out, literally called our ESOP administrator up and said, I'd never really paid attention to this, and I took it in to my financial advisor, and I'd never taken the ESOP statement into the financial advisor, and he told me today I can retire. So I'm retiring.
Yeah.
So, while I will miss that employee, and the customer will probably miss that employee, that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
We wanted people to be able to successfully retire. And the way the ESOP works and the way the company has grown, that has been so much more successful than we ever imagined, and we're really pleased with it. We've had 20 plus people retiring over the last few years each year, and that creates new opportunity for the younger employees too. That gives the kind of opportunity I had at Nichols, 40 years old and running a major business unit.
Yeah.
John Watson, who's our CEO now, was also 40 years old and ran a major business unit at Nichols, and there were a couple others that were young. John and I became really close friends, because we'd go to these strategic meetings, the offsites, and everybody in the room 60 years old. We're 38 or 40.
Yeah,
John's a couple years younger than I am.
And you're having to talk about stuff that's relevant for you, not relevant for someone.
We're talking about children. They're talking about grandchildren. We're going to the baseball games because we have to take a child, not because
our grandchild's there playing.
Yeah, it's a totally different world. So even though we were in different locations, that put us together a lot, and we had a lot in common. And so we became really close friends, and remain close friends to this day. The transition has just gone so well, and it's almost hard to imagine that it could have gone as well as it has.
Yeah. So I mean, you mentioned a little bit earlier, but I kind of want to transition from the torch now to but it plays a huge part in Torch even today. Is that in 2017 you began the CEO of Starfish Holdings? And you mentioned that a little bit earlier. Its portfolio contains Torch and Freedom Real Estate, which was established in 2014. Can you tell me a little bit about what Starfish Holdings is, and what exactly is the other company, like the Freedom Real Estate, that you do also operate?
Well, is back when we looked at forming Starfish Holdings, we formed it intentionally because we looked at we were paying a lot of money in rent, and this building was sitting here totally empty, and we were next door renting part of that building, and so I made the case to the board that we should look at buying this building and the building next door. It's sitting empty. We'd be able to buy it cheaply, and then it took a while for the board to get comfortable with that, and to do that properly. Torch couldn't really own the building. It really doesn't work well when the company owns its own building. So it made sense to create another company, and it made sense not to put that company in Torch. Mixing commercial business in with a defense company, that is the disaster that led to the selling of Nichols.
Yeah.
And so we'd all watch that. We didn't want to.
No, this is not happening.
So then I looked at it, and I had studied this for a number of years because I knew there would come a time when we wanted to do commercial work, and Nichols had figured it out, but they figured it out too late.
Okay.
And they had started the holding company concept to separate the commercial business, but it got put in place a little too late, so the earnings hiccup occurred because of them being mixed together. Um, the So it just made sense to do all that, and at the time it seemed so foreign to everybody. And I was really trying to talk the company into that we should own these buildings, and that is so foreign to this business. And it just happened that on the day of the board meeting, that there was an article in Wall Street Journal that Public Supermarkets, which is also an employee-owned company, started buying all of their buildings.
Hmm.
And so I was able to make the case that if somebody at Publix has figured this out and they've already bought a bunch of buildings, the article went through in gory detail why that made sense.
Yeah.
And so the board approved to let us go forward and buy these buildings. But in order for us to be able to get reimbursed for these properly, we had to create a company, and it had to be substantially in the business of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
It couldn't just own Torch buildings.
It had to own much more.
It had to own much more. So, and make the case that it is a real estate company,
Yeah.
and it is operating independently and separately. So at that time, I actually removed myself from the board of directors at Torch, and I just serve as an advisory. I'm not in charge of anything anymore. So John runs the company.
Yeah.
He can call me and get advice.
Yeah.
But I run Starfish, which is a holding company, and we take care of the ESOP and the 401k and the top level issues, the insurances and that kind of stuff. But then I also run Freedom, which is parallel to it's a sister company.
Okay.
And so we have invested some of the profits in Torch into two areas. One is investments that could be used if we ever need them to buy back employee stock if we have a lot of retirements in 1 year.
Yeah.
That we could draw on that and use to pay them back. And then also to purchase commercial real estate. And now I think we own close to 500,000 square feet, probably 450,000 square
Wow.
feet around town. We own the building here, the building over there, the building back there, the building over here. 3 buildings.
I know. I think I
down
saw on the
here.
website that they bought like a Frito-Lay building at one
We
point
got
too.
a Frito-Lay, we've got a Planet Fitness building, we've got Freedom Power Sports, and it's just coincidental that it's
Yeah.
named Freedom Power Sports. Torch is 30 rents about 30% of our holdings, 35%.
Okay.
And that continues to shrink as we continue
To get other things.
to get other things. And in fact, we just acquired another building a couple days ago, which will probably bring that down to 30% when we close.
Yeah.
We've signed a contract, but we haven't closed. So we have a pretty good diversity of industries represented in our buildings, and we're continuing also to do development. We build buildings for other people now. So
Okay.
we're building out, I would think, a full service real estate company.
Oh wow. And like you mentioned.
And it's been on the Inc. now.
Yeah. And which is
So,
crazy. I feel
yeah,
like.
it's been on the Inc. 3 times, and Torch has been 15 years in a row. So
I
and,
know.
and I'm sure you saw it. We spun out another company back in 2009 that was on the Inc.
Mm-hmm.
10 years in a row in Logic. So
It's just mind blowing to me to think just how successful you've been able to be in so many different industries. And we're talking about real estate. I read that in I can't remember what year it was, maybe early 2010s maybe. You were talking about developing this area and becoming what it is today, and you were kind of approached to move Torch to Research Park, where it was where much more of the industry is closer to you. But you stuck with this area and developed this area into, I think it was like a $12 million project it took to kind of make this what it is. How important was South Huntsville in this location to what Torch was, or was it just you saw the potential?
We talked with the mayor and the mayor's staff, and one of the things they were concerned about, we had actually picked a lot in Research Park and had a preliminary building design for that lot. And so we called the mayor and his team over and told them, here's our future plans, and the mayor expressed with us some concern that Southeast Huntsville, business flight from Southeast Huntsville, and he asked if we'd reconsider and consider staying here. And of course, my immediate response to with him, no way. I've really been working on this lake lot out in the park, and I really want my office to look out over the lake. And but he was rather convincing, as mayors oftentimes can be, and Mayor Battle, that is. And I spoke with him, and I said, well, it's like this. You have huge incentives to go move into the park, and so if I stay here, I lose all those incentives. And I said, the city's got to figure out a way, if you want Southeast Huntsville to go, to put some of those incentives over here. And he said, let me work on that. So he did. He went and worked on it, and he came back and said, well, if you'll make the investment here, we'll give you the same incentives that we do in Research Park, because we really believe someone has to make a commitment here to turn Southeast Huntsville around. And of course, when we bought these buildings and we bought the property around here, and we bought the property over here, this, a lot of this was, well, that was in foreclosure. The property behind us was in foreclosure, and this building had sat empty for 6 years. So it was basically becoming a blight, and the building across there was rented at about a 30% level, and the building next door across the street from us was less than 50%. So you really had a declining Southeast Huntsville, and of course several of the little malls in Hazeland sitting down there blocked, and then you had New Orleans place up here that had gone out of business. So he was really looking for somebody to plant down here, and we thought about it, and it's consistent with our mission, to be good to the community. And so we backed up, and he actually helped us in the negotiation for these buildings. He, being an old real estate guy, and by his background, was able to coach me in the negotiations on these buildings, and help me be a real estate guy. I was really at the.
And then now you actually have a real estate company.
Now we have a real estate company. So, I'm really thankful to him and his leadership down there. They've just been so helpful for us, and through that whole process, he was able to add insight that in terms of how to go about this process that I really didn't have.
Yeah.
And so through those changes, and we were instrumental then in helping with the South Huntsville Business Association formation down here. I hope I got the name right, but and Southeast Huntsville is and Southwest. We're on the west side, I guess. Southwest Huntsville is really humming.
Yeah.
And not only did we revitalize these three buildings, we've totally rebuilt, we've gutted and rebuilt these buildings. The infrastructure, everything is new in these buildings. This table that we're sitting at is the only thing that didn't change in here. And it's so heavy and was bolted to the floor, we couldn't figure out how to get it from the floor, so the carpet's literally laid around
it. I think that's crazy because, like, South Huntsville, I grew up in South Huntsville, and there really wasn't. For a while growing up at the beginning, there was a lot of stuff down there, but it's slowly. There's a lot of buildings. Like the old SCI building is empty. It has been empty for years. There's buildings. There's a lot of this. Hazeland now is starting to get developed, and it's becoming this huge thing. But South Huntsville definitely needed it. And I think at the time, I don't think you could have imagined when you kind of chose to do this location. You're like, this doesn't really look like the great place.
We were really concerned. Now, of course, the location's great for getting to the customer.
It's perfect.
And so as we finished these buildings, we realized it wasn't that people didn't want to be down here. It's just these buildings were dilapidated.
And
they were grody.
Yeah.
And, we were down here because it's really cheap rent. Really cheap rent compared to the park. And in the beginning, when we were getting started, we really needed to
find ways to
save money, because we were hiring people, and, you have to pay them for a while. So before you get paid from the government. So we were really cash poor in the beginning. So any place we could save money, we were really looking at it. But, we've since bought the Office Park South down here, and all the little shops around it were sort of imploding at the time. And it had about a 50% occupancy when we bought it. It's now got a 95% occupancy because we went in and cleaned it up.
Yeah.
we put about $15 million in that building and put new infrastructure. We sprinkled the building; it wasn't sprinkled. Put new heating and air so that the temperature's constant throughout the building, and it works every day, which it didn't before. And now it's a desirable place to be. And if you drive by down there, it's one of the prettier buildings in Huntsville. And I always thought the building was pretty, but now it's pretty on the inside and the outside. And we've just totally redone the landscape and everything. It's beautiful, and it just adds. There's now the building's full of people, so all those little shops that were out of business next door are thriving again.
Yeah.
And the little restaurants are popping back up. You can now walk over and get something to eat, whereas before you walk over and look at an
empty building.
So we're really, really happy with what we've accomplished here, and to be part of revitalizing the community down here, especially this lot behind us, in which we've put now probably 130, 140,000 square feet of buildings back there. That lot we bought out of bankruptcy for I think 40 cents a square foot.
Oh wow!
So now property and the property here when we bought it was a couple $3 a square foot. Now that property's $10, $12 a square foot.
And it's unheard of to even find $3 a square foot anywhere really now in Huntsville. It's booming. And that's just it's such a and like you said, putting that together, the programs like the Torch Helps, and putting together these real estate things that are able to help in areas in Huntsville that need some revitalization, need to be.
Well, and I don't know if you've seen the Planet Fitness on the South Parkway. That was the old skate park.
Yeah.
And it had really run down and was just a closed up old building on South Parkway. It's now a beautiful building.
Yeah,
Planet Fitness did a wonderful job.
Yeah. And that area is starting to look like they're adding more businesses along that side. And even if you go farther down, I mean, they're putting a Whataburger down there. They're putting there's a Starbucks right across from.
So it's coming alive again.
It is.
And I'm real happy with that, and seeing the new homes go up down here. But I'm also, as I drive around, seeing the older homes. The dumpsters being backed up outside, and they're just basically taking everything out and redoing those homes down there. So it's really nice to see that revitalization going on.
Definitely. So over these last 19 years of Torch, and now into Starfish Holdings and Freedom Real Estate and everything that you have, very much of this is an entrepreneurial journey. I mean, it's a story of you and your co-founder and everyone that was involved. Did you always consider yourself entrepreneurial back in college when you went to Cumberland and Kentucky? And that you always thought you would start something one day, or did that ever really dawn on you?
Yeah, I think several times I've thought about businesses. Even prior to going to college, I thought about had a big desire for cars and being customizing cars, and myself and a friend had often talked about either starting a parts store or a auto shop kind of thing. And then off and on over the years, there's been a number of things where I thought about maybe a franchise or something like that. When I really settled in at Nichols, maybe early on I would think about things like that, but as I got settled in, I really was happy in the career there, and really didn't think much about starting anything outside there. When they had me in D.C., I really liked my job, but I did think for a while that the stakeout down here would be awful nice up in the subdivisions up there. So I at least explored that, and then I just was too busy in my job to try to follow through on that. So I've always had that little nudge, and I literally just started another business. And going back to my youth, I've just started a customization shop for autos. And it's only a few weeks old.
And I think that's, like you said, that little nudge. And I think, looking at the journey, I think that the Nichols being bought out and you kind of being escorted out at that moment kind of was that final nudge. It was that, okay, like you've been thinking about this on and off for the last 40 years at that point, 50 years. You can now do it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that was I really would not have. I looked at that probably at the time as probably one of the scariest and worst days of my life. But as
Mm-hmm.
it turns out, that was probably a new beginning. I
Yeah.
didn't realize it at the time. Now I worked at a couple other places before Torch Technologies was started, and while those places were good places, I just didn't fit.
Yeah.
And so I knew, if I was going to do what I wanted to do, I had to start it. And thank goodness Don agreed to come. In the end, I probably would have started it anyway, but
Definitely helps to have
like I
somebody.
said, we were a 1-2 punch that probably don't get combined very often because of the nature of where his past business was. We were both modeling and simulation. We had huge modeling and simulation uh, backgrounds and
Mm-hmm.
skills, and it just positioned us real well to go into these areas. And like I said, I was in area A and B, and the government reorganization put A and B together, so it's sort of like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Let's go get this.
Yeah.
So, and we did. And anytime there's a reorganization, it's an upheaval.
Mm-hmm.
So it creates opportunity for new person. And I mean, we just couldn't have asked for better timing.
So looking at this journey over the last, since starting in 2002, how much of your success over this last 19 years would you contribute to being in the right place at the right time, and how much would you contribute to your hard work?
Well, right place at the right time is always good.
Yeah.
But if you don't work hard, it doesn't matter if you're at the right place at the right time if you just let the opportunity pass.
Yeah.
Uh, when we started, I had sort of a philosophy that was passed on to me from Nichols Research. Chris Horgan made the statement once in one of his training sessions: "Don't ask anybody to do anything you're not willing to do."
Mm-hmm.
And so I carried that forward to Torch, and when we had proposals to do, I wanted to be one of the first ones here, if not the first one, and I'd be the last one to go home at night. And so there was a lot of hard work there because I wanted to show the folks that were willing to stay that the best way to show them you appreciate it is to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And that continued, and at 2010, I think it was, February 23rd, 2010, we had some major decisions to make, and as we went through those decisions, no matter what we decided, people that were close to us were going to get hurt. There was not a good, easy solution
Mm-hmm.
for everybody. Somebody was going to get hurt. You could choose A or B. You're just choosing who's going to get hurt, and you try to make the best decision for the company. And as we went through those decisions, that began to weigh on me, and the stress of having worked 60, 80 hours a week for the previous 10 years also weighing on you. And I had a heart attack in my office. And up until that point, I had followed the philosophy: I'll be the first one here and the last one to leave. But some 6 or 8 weeks later, I don't remember exactly how long I was out, I came back and we were kicking off a proposal just a few days after I got back. And the proposal kickoffs at that time were always at 5:15, so we'd work a regular day and then we'd go 5:15 and meet
Mm-hmm.
to kick off the proposal efforts, and those were done in the evenings for the most part because we just didn't have a proposal staff then. We didn't have enough money to have a full-time proposal staff. And so as I walked around to go in that meeting, I can remember dreading it because I knew I really wasn't up to that pace because
Yeah.
I just really hadn't gotten my strength back. And 2 of my senior managers were waiting for me at the door. They knew which door I would walk in. And they stood in the doorway and said, "Go home." That's back to that culture.
Yeah.
They were taking care of me.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "We don't need you here. For these hours, you've taught us what we need to know.
Yeah.
It's time for you to let us do this." And I initially went back to my office. I was angry because they
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kicked me out. They just kicked me out of my meeting.
Yeah. You're like, this is my place. This is my building. What are you doing?
And I sat there for a few minutes, and then suddenly it dawned on me what had just happened. And that's when you realize the culture you created is
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
And I haven't worked a proposal since. They'll have me do some reviews and stuff, but
Yeah.
the decision they made the decision that day.
Yeah.
It's more important for you to be here and be alive and guide us
Yeah.
than it is for you to try to show you're as tough as we are.
Yeah.
We're younger, we're stronger,
And it's a tough thing, I think. I mean, especially something that you've seen grow like this.
And two, there'll be a proposal done by this part of the company, the next part of the company, the next part of the company. Well, I was trying to ride herd on all of them.
Oh, wow.
So, they were telling us, we'll get ours, and these people will help us.
Mhm.
And then the next one say, we'll get ours, and then we'll get help from other folks. You can't ride over all these. You
No.
need to go home. And, that was a defining moment for
Mhm.
me in terms of realizing we had created something different.
Yeah. And I think that's, like I said, you would love to take credit for the employees and what the culture is, but the employees have really made the culture of Torch what it is.
Think about that. They consciously stood by the door.
Yeah, and said, "You're not coming in."
They knew to the minute what time I would walk in that.
They knew what door, they knew when, and they were waiting for you.
Standing there, and I still remember that like it was yesterday. Go home.
Yeah. Did you sit in the office long before you went home?
Maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I don't really know.
Yeah.
I sort of stood.
It might have seemed longer than it actually was.
I don't know exactly how long it was. I stood for a little bit, and then it was like this calming glow came over, and then I just sort of smiled and walked out.
I went home.
Felt odd. Felt really odd.
A whole drive home wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
That's
Do you know what?
What?
The win rate went up.
Yeah.
That day they delegated to themselves, and the win rate went up.
Yeah.
So I was holding them back.
I don't know if they would think that, maybe, but
they probably know it. It was an excuse to kick me out.
So there's one thing that I want to bring up, and I wasn't really sure where it would fall in the conversation. Doing a lot of research, there's a lot of things out about you, about the company, about articles written, stuff like that. And one that I wanted to kind of mention because I thought was just it was super interesting and just very kind of a crazy thing for me to think someone in Huntsville would be mentioned. But I came across this article, it was in the Forbes article in 2019, and it was titled "How Bill Roark Built a Different Kind of Company and Rocketed to Success." How do articles like this make you feel that potentially someone like me, right out of college, or someone that's in college, or even just anybody, that they could be reading this and kind of that model, that employee ownership, that culture that you were able to create, could read this article and maybe even start something that is very similar in style to what Torch is and what giving back to the community and as well as giving back to their employees?
Well, we certainly weren't the first to give back to the community, and we do give back good, but we're not the largest probably in terms of what we give, but we're consistent and reliable for the community, and that's something that we're really, really proud of. And I think in the grand scheme of things, when the community's needed us, we've stepped up above normal too, as well. And when times like the tornadoes and stuff, we've dug deep and gone and found some things. The employee ownership model is not unique to us.
Yeah.
Dynetics and Camber were probably the two largest early. They've since succumbed to pressure and sold. But there are a number of companies around town that have come and talked to us about the model. They like the model, and they've converted to employee ownership. Maybe as many as certainly more than a half dozen, maybe as many as a dozen have converted. Only a few of them to 100%, but a number of them are on their way to 100%.
Yeah.
It's hard to do the 0 to 100. It's easier to go 30, 60, 90
Yeah.
or something like that. So we have a number of them that are in the journey, and they still come back and ask questions about, what did you do here, and how do you drive the culture? And so, I still have an open door for all those that come in, and I haven't charged any of them. I just sit down. In fact, I did a couple of meetings a week before last. Talked to a management team and to about to be new CEO would take over of a company when it became employee owned, and the owner went home and spent a lot of time coaching them. I do believe in this model. It's this is something I said years ago before the socialism stuff became so political and capitalism. But I believe there is a socialist component to this in that everyone does well.
Yeah.
But we also add a capitalist component where we reward those who make the company successful, and that drives the motivation for those who can make the company grow, and it allows them to be rewarded above and beyond. But I like the idea where nobody's left behind.
Yeah.
And I have a little plaque on the back of my door that I picked up in a gift shop some 15 or 18 years ago. That's it's hung somewhere in my office where I see it every day. So it's literally hanging where when I open my door and put my jacket up, now that I don't wear a jacket anymore, I probably need to move it, that I would see it every morning so it would remind me. And it's a quote by Dr. Luther King, and I never quote him properly because he was an elegant speaker and I'm just a country boy. But the essence of it is it's always the right time to do the right thing. And I think the right thing is for the people who make the company successful to be successful. I think I like the model where everybody's got a stake in the outcome. Everybody's motivated to make the company do well. We do surveys, and 93 to 95% of our employees are considered engaged based on the surveys. A typical company's below 50 or maybe 50 or 60 if they're doing really well. We're running in the mid-90s. It's because everybody's got a stake in the outcome. I like to tease with the employees and talk to them about the real estate. I said, load your mom and dad up and take them to these addresses and tell them you own part of this building.
Yeah,
because they do.
I mean, yeah, which is a crazy thing.
It's a crazy thing. They're real estate developers. They have a, and if you stay in the ESOP for a few years, it becomes substantial.
Yeah.
So you start looking around, and all of a sudden wow. I've got ownership in, maybe a dozen buildings here in town, and we will eventually leave Huntsville with that too. We'll start investing nationally. In fact, we've already looked. We just haven't procured something outside of Huntsville. We've made some offers. So, that's an interesting thing, and it makes, it motivates people to do better, because if they do better for the company, then their account goes up, and they can see it every year when they get their statement, and it's real.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. Like I mentioned to you off air, before I even started this podcast, before I probably even thought about doing this, I had a list of people to sit down and talk with, and you were on that list. And so I thank you very much for the opportunity. I continue to look forward to the growth that Torch will have, your other companies will have in Huntsville, as well as nationally in the years to come, as well as continue to look for the impact and the legacy that Torch will leave in Huntsville for years.
Well, thank you. It's been a good interview. I appreciate all the research. You came prepared.
Thank you.